Alright guys, welcome back to F1 News. More drama off track in the world of Formula 1 after Zak Brown's damning comments against Christian Horner's reign of terror at Red Bull, implying that Adrian Newey is going to be far from the last member of staff to leave that team very shortly. Toto Wolff agrees. He says that yes, Mercedes have also been receiving many CVs from Red Bull employees that may well be looking for a way out of that situation. Horner though says, what are you talking about, Toto? How about fix your car and focus on the 220 engineers we took from you over the last several years? Very much intrigued your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I would greatly appreciate it. Interesting race this weekend. Haas driver Magnussen, by the way, is up to 10 points on his licence. 12 will be a race ban. So he's got to be rather careful, and the way that last few races have gone, it doesn't seem likely that he's not going to get any more, unless the stewards somehow start going slightly easier on him. These are, well, when he's picked those points up, Saudi Grand Prix this season, right? So I guess he didn't have many at all before a few races ago, and now he's topping the lot because obviously he had that collision with Albon at Saudi Arabia, and afterwards he then held up the entire field. He wasn't penalised for that. 2 points for a crash with Tsunoda, of course, at the Chinese Grand Prix. Then the sprint, he got 3 more for the Hamilton drama, and then, of course, in the Grand Prix, he then crashed into Sargent. So it's funny in a way that Logan Sargent was building up a reputation to be effectively the new Nicholas Latifi, and now Magnussen comes along and, to be fair to him, has made the last few Grand Prix rather entertaining with his presence. But I'm sure Haas aren't too happy because, you know, Haas and certainly Williams, they've got quite a lot of money to spend on repair bills lately, and some of that most certainly is Magnussen's doing. So he's not far off a ban from a race, at which point probably Ollie Behrman gets a drive, which would be interesting to see, right? Because Behrman drove the Ferrari very effectively in Saudi Arabia, had a great Grand Prix, but also that Ferrari was a very good car. To see how he would fare in the Haas, to be fair to Behrman, he's probably getting that seat anyway next season, replacing Hülkenberg effectively. The question is whether Magnussen would stay as well, and he's getting loads of free practice sessions this year anyway in the Haas, and even Haas and other teams have mentioned this, that they care more about how he performs in those free practice sessions and in the time he gets in the Formula 1 car than they really do about the Formula 2 campaign. Further comments as well from Horner on the extent of the damage that Max Verstappen had during the Grand Prix. He of course took out this bollard, and as a result he ran over the curb at that chicane and took some damage to the underside of his floor. Now we don't know to what extent that was a thing, like to what extent the damage mattered. There obviously was some degree of damage. We saw the video footage of that yesterday. Verstappen though said the car didn't feel massively different, if any different at all. He felt like the similar balance problems were there pre and post damage. Now, of course, Red Bull have looked at the data. They've looked at the, inspected the car, and Horner says he was losing 1/4 of a second in turn 1 every single lap, which I have an incredibly hard time believing. Turn 1 is not an especially crazy corner. To lose 1/4 of a second there, based on damage, means that over the course of a lap, you're probably losing 2 seconds in performance. So I'm not really sure where this is coming from. Maybe 1/4 of a second in sector 1, that might add up and make more sense in my brain, because there's no way he was losing 1/4 of a second in turn 1 and then was losing nothing else the rest of the lap, because we believe that the damage was maximum about 1/4 of a second a lap. So, and if it was any more than that, Verstappen would have felt it, right? You'd have thought. So a little bit confusing. This is quite often a thing where, Red Bull, maybe if they don't win, there's talk, okay, well, he had damage, so it's we're still as dominant as we ever were, and maybe that's going to be true. But I think Imola will be fascinating to see, and obviously the damage was Verstappen's fault at the end of the day. Maybe the underlying balance problems that he had with the car that weekend, because Red Bull didn't set it up perfectly, caused him to go off track at the chicane, damage the floor, and the rest is history, of course, from then on out. But it's not like Perez was flying, right? Because we can obviously speculate the performance delta between Verstappen and Perez, and last year at this track, we know that it was rather significant indeed. But it's not like with the damage to Max, Perez was all of a sudden on the same pace as where, Verstappen was. And even Hamilton was probably faster than Perez, realistically speaking. Anytime you see a driver follow closely to the car in front for, 15 laps in a row, it's almost always that they are the faster driver. They just, don't have the ability to overtake. It's pretty difficult to overtake around Miami. Certainly overtaking a Red Bull in a straight line is always a massive challenge, and it's not like Mercedes have great straight line speed performance. So, usually you'll find that when a car is following, they probably were faster faster. Had Hamilton been in front, he possibly would have pulled away during that final stint. But these were the numbers on F1pace.com. They do a phenomenal job over there putting this together after every single Grand Prix. And yeah, so Norris, of course, was the fastest man on track, averaging a 1:32.1. Verstappen was 700ths behind on race pace. Then we had the two Ferraris very closely forward as well. I mean, the battle at the front of the field here, when Red Bull don't absolutely nail it, it's great, isn't it? Like, you really do get a great battle at the front of the field here. Between Norris, obviously Piastri was very competitive before the incident with Sainz. Perez was the 5th fastest man on track and was roughly 2.5 tenths behind Verstappen on pure race pace, even with the damage to Verstappen. So, you know, I think that says something about what was going on there. Tsunoda with a phenomenal performance here, given the fact that Ricciardo very much struggles to make the progress he would have hoped for after a very good sprint. Yuki had a really good race and was just straight up quicker than Russell during that final stint as well, which was very impressive. And these were the overall numbers, just to make it incredibly clear in a straight line. So what will these data points look like come Imola and beyond? Because Ferrari have made it clear they have a big upgrade in the works. They were only, you know, a couple of tenths off the pace of Norris. Now, Norris probably had more in the tank, and also he was stuck in traffic for the first stint, so these numbers don't tell the full picture, but still, they weren't far off Ferrari. And Vasseur said today that Ferrari have been driving a car that's several races old. Other teams, Mercedes even to some degree, brought some upgrades to Miami. Obviously didn't do all that much, right, but McLaren have brought some big changes. Red Bull brought an upgrade in Suzuka, and Ferrari haven't. So their feeling is there's a great upgrade to come. They're going to be fighting for wins every single weekend after this change. McLaren have more to come as well, which is very exciting, as to Red Bull, to be fair, and as to Mercedes, but realistically, nobody has Mercedes in that conversation right now to be a race winner, and even getting a podium this year is going to be a big challenge, and it seems like these are the three teams that are really going to be competitive. Aston Martin, by the way, bad weekend for Alonso. He said that he drove terribly all weekends. He was even behind Stroll in just pure pace, but even then, the car wasn't good, and they've struggled in that development war over the last season or so. They've effectively swapped places with McLaren, and it does raise questions onto what the future of that team is, certainly given Alonso's intentions to win the World Championship in 2026 under that new set of regulations. Tsunoda as well, it doesn't matter what this guy does, like how well he performs, he ain't getting a seat at Red Bull. I think it's quite clear they don't see him as that man, and it's unfortunate because I don't really know what more Yuki can actually do. But yeah, Red Bull don't see him as a top option. They're still looking probably at Sainz. That's the current rumour anyway, that Sainz has not necessarily rejected the Audi offer completely, but he's certainly kicked the can down the road, so he doesn't have to make the decision immediately. And Audi might say, all right, screw you, Carlos, you know, we're going to go get somebody else. And to be fair, as I expected, over the last couple of races, we've seen that kind of regression when Sainz had a great few Grand Prix, but now Leclerc seems to be asserting himself a little bit more on that driver pairing, as I think I would expect to have. But it's not like Sainz was, you know, slow. He was actually pretty quick. But the incident with Piastri on multiple occasions definitely caused some question marks, shall we say. But he's still in a contention for the Red Bull seat. I think there's a good chance that Horner will go and get him, just because there is the risk that Max leaves. Probably not next year, but the year after, I think it's possible and can't be entirely ruled out, on the words we're going to discuss here from Toto and Zak Brown in a couple of seconds. And in that eventuality, it wouldn't hurt to have a, you know, more competent driver in Carlos Sainz than I believe Sergio Perez is. But with Perez's solid and relatively stable performances so far this season, you can, of course, call that into question. Sainz, of course, with the Mercedes option, could be a potential situation there, but the Antonelli move for Mercedes seems to be becoming more and more likely as time progresses. And also, does Sainz see Mercedes as a team that are moving in the right direction, whereas maybe Audi could be potentially and could offer him more money and a more stable longer-term deal? There is a debate to be had on that, absolutely. Toto as well was commenting on the Grand Prix and saying that, yeah, Lewis was faster than Perez in the Red Bull today on the same compound. And to be fair to Mercedes, P6 for them sounds like, you know, historically that's a bad result, and it is a bad result. But actually, that doesn't seem too bad. Certainly for a track like Miami, where they have struggled recently, you know, their car bouncing at this circuit was a big problem, even for the last couple of years. So their car actually was all right. And as he says, the car is very strong at the high-speed corners. The ride is a bit better, but they lose a lot of time in the lower-speed corners. That's really where they struggle heavily, the Mercedes. They can't seem to get both of them right. So there's certain problems to solve, and even Toto Toto's going to say in a second that effectively he's terrified at what this means for the team, which is something that is kind of concerning. Now, of course, they will be bringing further developments to the car. These developments in Miami may have worked to some degree, but certainly nowhere near as effective as what McLaren brought to their car. And as we see here from Formula Uno, guys that are close to Ferrari, Vasseur believes that Red Bull is no longer in the important comfort zone, and with a small step, Ferrari will be able to fight there every single weekend. Important words, because a great package for Ferrari is coming, and some updates for Red Bull. So it will be so telling on what sort of rest of the season we are going to get with what happens in Imola, right? Because, 2022 Imola, that weekend, we didn't know what was going to happen between the Red Bull and the Ferrari. Turned out that was kind of the turning point between Verstappen taking a step forward and it seeming clear that the Red Bull concept was the one that was going to be dominant for this entire cycle of regulations. Imola may be critical in terms of seeing whether we actually could have a championship fight this season and certainly next season. And that idea, of course, is helped by the departure of Adrian Newey, the greatest design genius in Formula 1 history, leaving Red Bull after months of speculation just before this weekend. Newey, understandably, was asked about this many a time during the weekend and gave various interviews and answers to this. I thought every single interview I heard from Newey, I became more and more convinced he's going to stay in the sport, because he started off his discussion saying, well, I'm going to take a step back. Then he said, well, I'll take a little break. And then he was discussing the 2026 regulations here with Rachel Brooks and basically said that, yeah, it's going to be a big challenge. I love the changes of regulations. I enjoy what happened in 2022. And all those that work on it, I'm sure will have a big challenge on their hands. And he also said in the interview as well that, he likes a challenge, right? That's kind of why he does this, is because he enjoys designing, he enjoys working in the sport. And it doesn't seem like the passion for him working in Formula 1 has gone. Maybe that motivation has taken a bit of a toll, being at Red Bull so long, and it has been widely reported that all the things behind the scenes at Red Bull have certainly not helped matters, but I think that Newey to Ferrari or somewhere else is definitely on the cards. But even if he doesn't, there are potentially, as a result of Newey's departure, other exits from Red Bull coming along soon. There was lots of talk about Jonathan Wheatley, who's, I think their sporting director over there at Red Bull. He's been there since 2006, similar to Newey. The rumour has it that, yeah, he's seen Newey depart and thinks, well, is now the right time for me to take a next step? Not necessarily because they feel like working with Horner is untenable, as in they don't want to work with a man that has done whatever he's reportedly to have done, or whether the team is internally in turmoil as a result of Horner being there. But it's more like maybe Newey leaves, and then if Newey leaves, people think, well, maybe it is about time that I also do a similar thing and depart, search for new challenges. As we have seen, let's say, with Mercedes over the last several years, as they were dominating the sport, there were plenty of employees, certainly from their high-performance Powertrains division, that engine department, right, that created the absolute monster they had in 2014 and slightly beyond that. Lots of those individuals departed, searching for new challenges, and that is where the door is absolutely open at Maranello, at Silverstone, and at Brackley, right, absolutely, for the likes of Mercedes. And even Ferrari have said this. Fred Vasseur has said that, sure, Newey would love to have him on board, but there's plenty of other engineers that are also registering their interest at Maranello, and the feeling is from Ferrari, certainly from McLaren, on the words of Zak Brown, and now from Toto Wolff, is like, yeah, lots of these Red Bull engineers are ringing my bell basically to say, hey, let's have a conversation about this. Toto Wolff also does say, though, that maybe he realises that Adrian Newey isn't going to join Mercedes at this point, but he says, yeah, even the greatest magician would probably struggle to solve our problems. The situation is terrifying. We must admit that it's very annoying to always have the same problem. And he says, yeah, there are no explanations, there are no excuses. If Lewis does a lap within a tenth of a difference from the leader, we're third, but then nothing works in the following time, right? We saw that happen from Q2 to Q3. So, Toto's confused about it. He reckons even Newey wouldn't be able to help them and admits it's kind of terrifying. So they need to hire staff, and they will have, it seems, options to choose from. Because Zak Brown during the weekend said that Newey will not be the last to depart Red Bull, an exodus is coming effectively, and just stirring the pots by saying, yeah, we've seen a massive increase in CVs coming in from the team, as CVs, resumes, whatever you want to say, people registering their interest in joining McLaren and potentially leaving Red Bull. So Toto was asked about this and actually says, yeah, this is true, but it depends on the reason behind this, right? So Toto actually says this, yeah, so Zak is absolutely correct. We have seen Red Bull CVs through all of the levels, which is kind of insightful because it implies that from top Red Bull staffers and, engineers, designers, I don't know, whatever you want to say, from top to bottom, they are potentially applying to Mercedes and throwing their CVs around elsewhere. Now, Toto says, sure, is this anything out of the extraordinary? And Toto says, well, this does happen. People change teams. They want to change the environment. But yeah, the belief is that there's lots of Red Bull guys that are throwing these around right now. And Toto is kind of, he doesn't want to go as far as to say that the Horner situation has completely destabilize the team, as Zak Brown went as far to say, but Toto does back up Zak's opinion that, yeah, there's probably more Red Bull CVs right now than it has been, or at least what you would typically expect there to be. So this is probably something that Mercedes need to capitalize on. We know that they potentially have money to spend because they're willing to pay Max Verstappen $150 million a year, whatever it's going to be, to get him onto their team. Now, sure, that would be outside of the cost cap. Hiring engineers would be in the cost cap, but there might be various loopholes and ways around it, as we have seen Red Bull probably use over the last couple of years with this whole percentage thing. So Horner saw this, Zak Brown saying this, Toto Wolff following up on it, and decided to fire back and says, yeah, the two candidates involved, they talk a lot. I guess meaning Brown and Toto. I'm not going to be sucked in for a tit-for-tat war. I would be more focused on Toto's own issues that he has. I don't have any concern with the strength and depth here at Red Bull. Of course, there's always going to be movement between teams. I don't know how many people we have employed by McLaren this year, as in from McLaren, I guess. Mercedes, we have taken 220 people, 220 out of high-performance powertrains into Red Bull powertrains. So when we start talking about losing people, I'd be more worried about 220 people than 1 or 2 CVs. So yeah, Horner clapping back as he does, try to cook these guys. And, maybe he's got a point. They've hired loads of engineers from Mercedes over the last few years, and that has absolutely hurt Mercedes' dominance and helped Red Bull. And, of course, should also theoretically help their Red Bull Powertrains project when that comes into fruition from 2026 and beyond. But then, as he says at the bottom, yeah, I'd be more worried if I was Toto about losing all those people over the last few years than gaining 1 or 2 of mine. But does kind of admit that, yeah, there might well be 1 or 2 CVs from important people at Red Bull that are floating around there right now. So, you can argue that Horner is clapping back kind of fiercely in this way because maybe he is feeling the pressure on this regard to some degree. The fact that, yeah, some of his top guys may well be exploring their options, and Newey's departure is an indictment on Horner's leadership, right? Now, Horner still deserves a massive amount of credit for what he's achieved at Red Bull, and even getting Newey to join in the first place was arguably a stroke of genius on Horner's side, and maintaining him in that team for as long as he has done was very impressive. But nonetheless, Newey leaving as he has, seemingly down to some of the actions of Horner in various regards over the last several months or so, is not a great look if you are Christian Horner, and it certainly wouldn't be a great look if there were to be further important employees departing from the situation. So yeah, what do you guys think about this? What is next, really? Because I think it was a matter of time until Newey departed. It's been going around for months at this point. There's now rumours that other engineers are going to leave. Zak Brown has made it very clear that there's going to be not even engineers necessarily, but just important people in the Red Bull Racing organisation. They're going to depart. Who's going to be the next to fall? If the next of all was to be a guy like Helmut Marko, then all of a sudden it opens the door to the Max Verstappen situation as to what that might mean, because Max has been very clear that he will not race for a team if Marko isn't there. So I'm sure there's more to come. There's always more to come on this Red Bull stuff, and I think that will remain true for a very long time to come. And it comes at an interesting time, right? Because, Mercedes, they're trying to hire people, they're losing people potentially elsewhere. Red Bull, this might be the start of a downhill trajectory for them. McLaren seem to be on the uptick. And I've said this before, right? Like, I would love to see a world in the next couple of years, we once again have the great years of Ferrari versus McLaren back again. I feel like at times in sport, the more things change, the more things stay the same, and there's lots of fans right nowadays that they're Ferrari fans or they're McLaren fans, but they also like Lando Norris, or they also kind of support Charles Leclerc or something. It's like, back in the good old days, Ferrari and McLaren were arch rivals. You never see someone wearing a Ferrari jersey and a McLaren hat. Like, that doesn't fly. It's one or the other. You're a Ferrari man or you're a McLaren man back in the day. But today it's a little bit different, right? Because those two teams haven't been battling it out for championships as they once were. So I'm hoping for a world where we get back to that. And I wouldn't be massively surprised if it happens over the next several years. And Hamilton's words that he's basically had enough of not winning and he wants to get back to where he belongs, well, that may have something to say on what he thinks about Mercedes and his next adventure with this man at Mr. Fred Vasseur. So very much interested your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.